There is a version of you that your current life is actively hiding from you. Not because he does not exist, not because he lacks talent, not because destiny forgot his address, but because comfort has built a padded cell around his potential, and you have mistaken that padded cell for peace. You call it taking it easy. You call it waiting for the right mood. You call it protecting your mental health. You call it being realistic. You call it just needing a little more time. No. Let us strip the perfume off the corpse. What you are dealing with is not a scheduling problem. It is not a productivity problem. It is not even a motivation problem. It is a power problem. You do not suffer because life is too hard. You suffer because too many small, soft, undisciplined impulses have been allowed to govern your kingdom. You have appetites making policy. You have moods sitting on the throne. You have distraction acting as your chief advisor. You have comfort writing laws in a state that was supposed to be ruled by will. And so you wake up with plans worthy of a conqueror, but live by noon like a hostage. You promise, you postpone, you imagine, you negotiate, you delay, you scroll, you indulge, you explain, you forgive yourself too quickly. Then night comes, and with it, that private disgust no one sees, that bitterness, that quiet humiliation, that sensation that your life is being stolen in broad daylight, and the thief has your face. Most people think laziness is the love of rest. It is not. Laziness, in its most dangerous form, is a failure of command. It is what happens when the higher part of you issues, decrees the lower part of you never intends to obey. And if that fracture remains unresolved long enough, something terrible happens. You begin to lose respect for your own word. The treaty between intention and action collapses. Your promises become decorative. Your ambitions become theatrical. Your identity becomes fictional. You say you are building a future, but your habits reveal a citizenry already loyal to decline. Machiavelli understood something brutal that modern self-help culture tries very hard to soften. Power decays when discipline decays. In The Prince, he warns that when rulers think more of ease than of arms, they lose their states. He is speaking about princes and war, yes, but the principle cuts deeper than politics. A human being who studies comfort more than hardship, ease more than training, relief more than readiness, will also lose his state, the state of his character, his schedule, his body, his attention, his future. That is your first awakening. Your life is not a garden that flourishes by sentiment. It is a state, a contested one, a vulnerable one, a state surrounded by enemies, both external and internal. There is appetite, there is vanity, there is fatigue, there is resentment, there is fear, there is the narcotic pull of convenience, there is the seduction of tomorrow, there is the little inner lawyer who can justify anything except greatness. And the tragedy is that most men do not lose their lives in one spectacular collapse. They lose them by slow concession. One extra hour in bed. One more day before starting. One more indulgence because today was stressful. One more distraction because focus feels hard. One more excuse because the conditions are not ideal. This is how empires rot, not with thunder, but with permission. The comfort zone is not merely a place. It is a political system. It is an internal regime built on the avoidance of friction. Its laws are simple. Seek the immediate. Avoid the difficult. Protect the ego. Postpone the decisive. Prefer fantasy to confrontation. And call all of that balance. It gives you the illusion of safety while quietly confiscating your future. It lowers the pain of the present by increasing the shame of the future. It is a very efficient tyrant because it rarely shouts. It whispers. Later, tomorrow, after this week, when you feel ready, when you have more energy, when life calms down. But life does not calm down for the undecided. It merely exposes them. And that brings us to the second awakening. Discipline is not a lifestyle accessory. It is not a cute morning routine with clean fonts and lemon water. It is sovereignty. It is the ability to command yourself and be obeyed. It is the ending of civil war inside the self. A disciplined person is not someone who always feels good. He is someone whose standards have become more authoritative than his moods. He no longer asks, "Do I feel like it?" He asks, "Who rules here?" That question is everything, because once you really understand the question, laziness starts to look less like softness and more like treason. Why? Because every avoided task teaches your nervous system a lesson. Every act of retreat becomes a vote. Every surrender says, discomfort is stronger than my word. Fatigue is stronger than my aim. Impulse is stronger than identity. Over time, you do not merely fail to complete goals. You train yourself into weakness. You rehearse self-betrayal until it becomes automatic. Then one day you look for confidence and cannot find it because confidence was never built by wishing. It was built by evidence. Evidence that when you speak, something moves. Machiavelli is useful here because he had no patience for sentimental illusions. He knew that a ruler who cannot maintain order invites contempt. And contempt is one of the most corrosive forces in any system. In public life, contempt destroys authority. In private life, self-contempt destroys momentum. Once you start seeing yourself as the man who quits, delays, drifts, or folds, everything becomes heavier. Even small tasks carry symbolic weight. A workout is no longer just a workout. It becomes a referendum on whether you still have command. This is why your problem feels larger than laziness. Because it is larger than laziness. You are not just trying to become productive. You are trying to recover legitimacy. Now, here is where most people go wrong. They think the answer is to become more inspired. They binge motivation, consume podcasts, save quotes, plan routines, buy supplements, announce comebacks, and wait for some tidal wave of emotion to carry them toward action. That is childish. Borrowed motivation is the mercenary army of self-improvement. It looks impressive on parade. It fails in real battle. It will fight for you while the music is loud, while the video is playing, while the emotion is hot, while the fantasy is vivid. But when the morning is cold, when the task is boring, when nobody is watching, when progress is invisible, it deserts. And a man who relies on borrowed fire will repeatedly go dark. You do not need more emotional spectacle. You need your own forces. You need systems that remain when inspiration leaves. You need rules that function when enthusiasm dies. You need a structure that does not ask your feelings for permission. Because motivation visits, discipline stays armed. And this is why the transformation feels violent. Not because discipline is cruelty in the childish sense, but because it is regime change. You are not adding a habit. You are overthrowing a government. Machiavelli writes that there is nothing more difficult than introducing a new order of things, because the innovator faces enemies from the old order and only lukewarm defenders from the new. That is exactly what self-mastery feels like. Your old habits are not neutral. They are invested interests. They benefit from your weakness, and your new identity at first has almost no troops. That is why the first weeks of real discipline feel so strange. The body protests. The mind rationalizes. The environment resists. Your friends become comedians. Your cravings become philosophers. Your fatigue becomes a prosecutor. Everything in you that fed on your former softness suddenly acts like your new standards are extremism. But that resistance is not proof you are wrong. It is proof the coup has begun. Understand this clearly. When you decide to leave the comfort zone does not congratulate you. It counterattacks. It sends nostalgia. It sends doubt. It sends the memory of your old pleasures, your old excuses, your old identity. It tells you that you are being too harsh, too rigid, too intense, too ambitious, too different from the people around you. It tries to make mediocrity feel moral. Do not be fooled. Decay often speaks in the language of kindness. Machiavelli also says that whoever desires constant success must change his conduct with the times. That line matters because many people are not lazy in the simple sense. They are outdated. They are using an old self to solve a new problem. They still operate as if they were younger, less distracted, less exhausted, less digitally poisoned, less fragmented. They think the strategy that once worked, vague effort, occasional bursts, last-minute pressure, emotional momentum, will keep working forever. It will not. Times change. Conditions change. Temptations scale. The person who refuses to adapt is eventually defeated by a world more organized than his will. So if you want to become more disciplined, stop asking, "How do I feel?" and start asking, "What age am I living in? What environment am I fighting? What enemy architecture surrounds me?" If your phone contains 1,000 appetites, your discipline cannot remain casual. If your work requires deep focus, your routines cannot remain improvised. If your comfort zone has been reinforced for years, your response cannot be vague. You need a strategy proportionate to the threat. And the threat is severe because comfort does not only steal output, it steals hardness, it steals edge, it steals your relationship to difficulty. It makes ordinary effort feel extreme. It turns minor inconvenience into emotional drama. It convinces you that boredom is injury, that friction is injustice, that any sustained exertion is somehow unnatural. But nothing is more natural than exertion in the service of becoming. The soft age has simply trained you to experience necessity as violence. So let us get practical, because the point is not to admire severity. The point is to become effective. The first thing you must do is conduct a ruthless audit. Not a cute journal entry, not a vague reflection, an audit. Where exactly do you betray yourself? At what hour do you become weak? What device disarms you? Which people normalize your softness? What story do you tell right before quitting? Where does your schedule leak authority? which pleasures are not pleasures at all, but anesthesia, which unfinished tasks are rotting your confidence, which environments invite your lower nature to govern. Do not answer poetically. Answer clinically. Weak men stay confused because confusion protects them from judgment. Clarity is harsher. Clarity names the crime scene. Clarity says, this is where I disappear. This is where my standards collapse. This is where comfort collects rent. Once you can see the pattern, the second step is to remove negotiation. Most failure is not caused by lack of capacity. It is caused by too much diplomacy with impulse. You wake up and hold a referendum with a part of you that should never have voting rights. You ask the body whether it wants discipline. You ask the craving whether it prefers restraint. You ask fatigue whether it endorses effort. Of course, they say no. Their job is not to build the future. Their job is to preserve the immediate. So write laws before the mood arrives. Wake at the same hour. Train at the same hour. Put the phone in exile during deep work. Pre-decide your meals. Pre-decide your work block. Pre-decide what happens when resistance comes. Do not improvise under fire. Machiavelli admired the kind of leader who prepared in peace for what would later be required in war. In chapter 14, he praises the habit of studying difficulty before difficulty arrives, and even recounts how Philopoemen used calm moments to think through battle positions and possible responses. The point is simple. The prepared man is harder to surprise. The undisciplined man is defeated by ordinary mornings because he enters each day like an amateur, unarmed, undecided, exposed. This is also why procrastination is so corrosive. It is not neutral waiting. It is authority bleeding out. In the Discourses, Machiavelli condemns doubt and delay because uncertainty makes both speech and action incoherent, and late decisions help no one while harming the decider. Again, he is speaking about republics and war, but the private application is mercilessly clear. Half decisions create half lives. If you keep standing between two selves, the soft one and the sovereign one, you will inherit the penalties of both and the power of neither. And now we come to one of the harshest but most useful translations of Machiavelli into self-discipline. Your lower self should not be managed only by affection. It should also be managed by consequence. People love to quote Machiavelli, saying it is much safer to be feared than loved. In politics, that sentence is often abused, but inside the self, it contains a brutal truth. If your lazy impulses know that your standards are optional, they will test you every day. If your lower appetites discover that every promise can be renegotiated, they will never stop negotiating. So yes, learn to encourage yourself, but also build a structure your weakness has reason to fear. Fear the missed deadline. Fear the public embarrassment of inconsistency. Fear the cost of wasted years. Fear becoming the man who can imagine but not execute. Fear a life in which your talent dies upholstered in comfort. Notice, I am not telling you to hate yourself. That is too crude and too stupid. Hatred is unstable. It burns hot, then leaves ash. What you need is something colder and more durable. Governed consequence. Make the bad habit harder. Make the good habit easier. Increase friction around weakness. Increase access to strength. Delete the apps. Block the sites. Move the phone out of the room. Train before the world can infect your mind. Tie your work to public standards if necessary. Stop pretending that the access without restraint is maturity. A city with no walls is not trusting, it is vulnerable. Machiavelli says that fortune shows her power where valor has not prepared barriers and defenses against her. There is a whole philosophy in that line. Bad days will come, fatigue will come, disappointment will come, chaos will come, temptation will come. The question is not whether fortune will flood the riverbanks. The question is whether you built the embankments before the storm. A disciplined life is not a life with no turbulence. It is a life whose structure can absorb turbulence without surrendering command. Now let us expose another lie. Many people think the comfort zone is attractive because it feels good. That is only half true. Its deeper seduction is moral. It protects your ego from the verdict of reality. As long as you do not fully commit, you can keep pretending your unrealized greatness is intact. As long as you do not train seriously, work seriously, build seriously, focus seriously, sacrifice seriously, you can tell yourself the fantasy remains possible. The comfort zone preserves potential in a jar. It never lets it become performance. And that is why people cling to softness. Softness lets them remain innocent. But innocence is expensive, because the longer you hide from difficulty, the more terrifying difficulty becomes. The longer you postpone discipline, the more mythical disciplined people seem. The more you drift, the more you begin to tell mystical stories about those who simply built command. You call them different, gifted, lucky, genetically superior, naturally consistent. But often they are something far less romantic, people who stopped negotiating with their own sabotage. They buried the version of themselves that always needed to be in the mood. They accepted boredom. They accepted repetition. They accepted that mastery is built in unfashionable hours. They accepted that greatness is usually ugly before it becomes elegant. And because they accepted those things, they became dangerous in a way comfort addicts never do. That is the word most people are afraid of, dangerous. They hear it and think of cruelty. But there is a nobler kind of danger, the danger of a man who cannot be cheaply seduced away from his aim. The danger of a person whose schedule is not easily infiltrated. The danger of someone who can feel discomfort without worshiping it, feel fatigue without obeying it, feel fear without reorganizing his life around it. That kind of person is difficult to manipulate, difficult to distract, difficult to own. That is what discipline actually buys you. Not just six-packs and clean calendars, freedom from trivial control. A person ruled by comfort is ruled by whatever promises fastest relief. He is easy to sell to, easy to flatter, easy to derail, easy to bait, easy to weaken. He can be managed by mood, dopamine, convenience, and social approval. But the man who has practiced command over appetite acquires a different center of gravity. He does not chase every invitation. He does not explain every boundary. He does not collapse every time life becomes inconvenient. He becomes, in a quiet way, politically independent from his own impulses. And the world feels that. Machiavelli also understood the importance of appearance. He says, everyone sees what you appear to be, few really know what you are, and that people judge largely by results. Again, read this carefully, not as a lesson in fakery, but as a warning against performative ambition. Stop announcing what you will become. Stop advertising intentions that your habits cannot defend. The world is not moved by your plans. It is moved by evidence. Visible consistency creates reputation. Reputation creates trust. Trust creates weight. If you want your life to feel more solid, stop curating the image of discipline and start producing the consequences of discipline. That means fewer declarations, more receipts. Less, I'm about to change my life. More changed life. Less emotional theater. More repetition. Less obsession with how hard it feels. More obsession with whether it got done. Here's a standard you can use. Every day must contain at least one non-negotiable act that proves your future outranks your mood. One deep work block, one training session, one hard conversation, one page written, one temptation refused, one task completed before pleasure begins. Why only one to start? Because victory, repeated, builds jurisdiction. You are teaching the self a constitutional principle. The higher command still governs here. Then, once one act is stable, add another. Not because you are chasing aesthetic perfection, but because you are expanding territory. First, the morning, then the body, then the work, then the attention, then the finances, then the speech, then the environment. Piece by piece, the state returns to order. And yes, there must be rest. But understand the distinction that weak men constantly blur. Recovery is not the same as indulgence. Recovery serves future strength. Indulgence serves present escape. Recovery is strategic. Indulgence is political sabotage disguised as self-care. If your rest leaves you sharper, calmer, stronger, more ready, it is an ally. If it leaves you foggier, softer, later, weaker, more fragmented, it is tribute paid to decay. You must learn that difference with surgical honesty. Because the comfort zone is cunning. It will happily wear the mask of healing. It will take your avoidance, your numbing, your passive consumption, your endless decompression, and relabel them as compassion. Meanwhile, weeks disappear like coins through floorboards. And then there is the final humiliation. Not failure. Most people could survive failure. Failure has drama. Failure has dignity if it came from effort. The final humiliation is irrelevance to your own potential. It is becoming a spectator to the man you could have been. It is carrying around a private ghost. You meet him in the mirror sometimes. In the gym, you never committed to. In the business, you never built. In the book, you never wrote. In the body, you never forged. In the standards, you kept postponing. You feel him there, like a judge without a robe. That is the real horror of prolonged softness. Not that others will mock you, not even that you will earn less, build less, or achieve less. It is that you will know. You will know that the life you are living is smaller than the one you were called to carry. And knowledge like that curdles a man. So what must you do? You must make an alliance with necessity, not with mood, not with inspiration, not with convenience, with necessity. You wake because you said you would. You train because weakness has become too expensive. You work because drift is no longer acceptable. You simplify because distraction is taxation on your destiny. You remove temptations because self-knowledge is wiser than ego. You stop romanticizing comfort because you finally understand its invoice. You become predictable to yourself in the highest sense. Not dull, not mechanical, but reliable. Your own word starts to regain authority. Your days stop leaking. Your body stops feeling like enemy territory. Your schedule stops being occupied. The shame begins to thin. In its place comes something quieter, harder, less hysterical than motivation: self-trust. And when self-trust returns, so does force. You walk differently when you know you obey yourself. You speak differently when you know your habits are not counterfeit. You think differently when you are no longer constantly repairing the damage of your own inconsistency. This is why discipline changes more than output. It changes aura. Not in the childish internet sense, but in the ancient sense. Presence, gravity, internal order made visible. Other people may not know your routines, but they can feel structure when they stand near it. They can feel when a person is less available to chaos, less bribable by comfort, less eager to flee discomfort. There is a kind of silence that comes from self-command. It does not need to explain itself. That is the man you are trying to become. Not a machine, not a monk of suffering, not a productivity mascot, a sovereign. A man whose lower impulses are no longer sovereign. A man who can enter difficulty without collapsing into negotiation. A man who no longer needs the world to become easy before he becomes strong. Machiavelli wrote for a violent world, but the deepest lesson you should steal from him is not cruelty toward others. It is seriousness toward power. And the first territory over which power must be established is the self. If you cannot govern your appetites, your attention, your schedule, your speech, your environment, then every outer ambition rests on rotten beams. But if you can govern these, if you can create order where there was drift, decision where there was delay, repetition where there was fantasy, then life begins to reorganize around you. Not because the world becomes kinder, because you become harder to overthrow. So bury the soft tyrant inside you, the one who smiles while stealing your years. End the negotiations. Call laziness by its real name. Failed command. Call comfort by its real name, an expensive sedative. Call discipline by its real name, self-rule. Then start small, but start with finality. Today. Not emotionally, not ceremonially, politically. A single command, a single act, a single proof that the throne is occupied again. And once that proof exists, repeat it tomorrow. Then again. Then again, until the comfort zone, which once ruled you like a lazy king in silk, begins to fear entering your borders at all. Because there is a version of you that your current life has not yet met. Colder, clearer, less explainable, less negotiable, not cruel, but dangerous to everything in you that prefers decay. Build him, and when you do not ask whether it feels good. Ask whether the state is finally yours. If this script found you at the exact point where comfort has become unbearable, but discipline still feels far away, subscribe. This channel is for people who are tired of being managed by fear, softness, distraction, and self-betrayal. And if one area of your life has been under occupation by comfort for too long, body, work, mind, money, attention, write it in the comments. Name the territory. that is where the reconquest begins.